Good afternoon or morning, depending on when you're listening. This is David Gray, news writer with the Livingston Parish News, and I'm here with a special guest today, Mr. Jeff Ard. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself, sir. Take a
All
minute.
right. My name is Jeff Ard. I'm the councilman for District 1 for Livingston Parish and currently the chairman of the Livingston Parish Council.
And this is the kind of the year in review for the council. A lot of big things happened this year. We had several 3+ hour long meetings.
Yes.
The big topics this year were development. That was sort of the big issue, and that's kind of what you wanted to touch on a little bit, is just the stuff that was done in development this year, because prior to this year, uh, it was kind of open season, if you will, a little bit
Correct.
in Livingston Parish, and that's
Correct.
kind of what's led to the population boom in the parish, and has been able to help provide a lot of funds for the parish. But there's also been some side effects of that. So I guess for you, just sitting in your position as chairman, let's talk about just kind of hearing all these complaints from both sides, what it was like for you trying to manage those meetings, because I mean, like, it got kind of contentious at times this year.
Yes. So they were tricky to navigate around, if you will. As a chairman, it's my job to keep the meeting in order,
Mm-hmm.
keep it moving along. A lot of times it's hard for me to get in discussion and really be a part of it because, I could have people in the audience getting rowdy. I could have councilmen getting rowdy, and I have to be the one that maintains that control. So sometimes I would love to just be sitting over there in the seat and screaming and hollering with everybody else. I mean, I know how important this is to our parish,
Mm-hmm.
but my job was to be the chairman and control the chaos. And I tried to do that the best I could without showing any favoritism to any side. I just made sure and made my vote at the end on how I felt, uh, and I listened to what the people wanted, and they wanted some kind of control over this development instead of it just being open season. And I think this council worked very well in giving us something. I wouldn't say that it's perfect. I would say we're probably going to have to make a few more changes to
Mm-hmm.
get it right, but I think we made it strong enough to slow it down so that we can get it right.
And we're not going to get into specifics, because we've been writing about that all year, the specifics, and some of those ordinances are 30 pages long each.
Yes.
But I guess sitting where you were, what could you some of the arguments that you could see from both sides, could you talk about some of them where, like, from the resident side, saying, okay, I understand where this person's coming from, but also from the developer side, because you had some engineers who would get up there and speak, kind of in favor of, the rules that allowed them to do their job. So I guess sitting where you were, could you talk about some of the stuff that you saw that y'all tried to craft in those ordinances?
So we heard a major outcry from the people in traffic,
Mm-hmm.
drainage. That's the top two. So we wanted to implement something to focus on both of them, which I feel like we did. We actually had a lot of help from developers and engineering on the drainage part of it, which it's good that these groups do work outside of Livingston Parish and they know how other parishes do it, and they kind of bring that to the table and say, well, y'all might want to look at this, you might want to look at that. So I mean, I understood where the people were coming from, but the downfall that we have in our parish is the majority of our infrastructure is state roads.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of need the state to help us out in that part, and they're the ones that pretty much are the traffic studies are going to.
Yeah.
They're the ones that saying you can do this, you can't do this. We did implement one on parish roads that made them have to widen roads to help with the traffic on the parish roads. But same thing, once it got to a state road, it's out of our hands.
Yeah.
So we heard what the people were saying on that, but at the same time, you got to look at these people that have made investments 20 years ago on this property, and they've been paying this property off, and this is their entire retirement plan.
Yeah.
They're going to do a development at the end of their retirement. They pay their land off, and they're going to go retire whether they stay here or do whatever. So you can't just shut it down completely.
And that was one thing that Parish President Ricks came in when me and him did a podcast, I believe right when the moratorium started, a little bit after. And it's kind of hard just to say shut it down, which y'all did for 2 months, because the biggest private employer is construction in the parish. And I mean that that provides a lot of the money for funds that to allow y'all to do certain work. So it's kind of, I mean, granted for y'all, you only did it for 2 months, so it didn't really affect, even though I do remember y'all said y'all started hearing from people saying this was starting to bother them, some of the small time developers.
Yeah, and we we originally bounced around a 1 year, 12-month moratorium, and just kind of felt that it drug it out too much.
Mm-hmm.
That basically what we needed to do as councilmen was roll our sleeves up and get in there and get this done.
Mm-hmm.
It was by far the most work in a 2-month period that I've done as a councilman. It seemed like every night we were having an ordinance meeting, or just two of us on the phone. What are we going to do about this? Or me calling a developer, and how can we restructure drainage to make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't the only one doing it. Every councilman was doing it, and we was trying to bring all this information back and make the best ordinances we could for our parish. And like I said, I think we're close.
Mm-hmm.
But I we're seeing some challenges now. Because what this development moratorium led into was a little push to go a little faster with zoning.
Yeah.
And we're having a few headaches with the zoning, the districts that are zoned already. But it's just kinks that we just have to work out.
Yeah, and that was kind of leads into the next topic. Last summer, I believe, when y'all approved the different zoning categories,
Yes.
something that I remember again in that conversation with Mr. Ricks, and many times he said since then that zoning's a word that he never thought he would have heard in Livingston Parish.
Yep.
And y'all would mention that a lot during these development talks, because zoning was one of those taboo words that people don't want you telling you what to do with your property.
Correct.
But then y'all would get those phone calls about people complaining about what others are doing with their property. That I remember you said that one time during one of those talks.
Yeah.
And so we were hoping to have zoning done by the end of the year for all the districts. Not looking that way. Not going to happen. But
we do have three.
We have three.
We have District 1, District 5, and District 8.
Yes.
Which is me, Girlinghouse, and Delat.
Yes.
We all have ours. And it looks like it's probably a good thing that we did do just them three.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be able to work some kinks out between them three.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good mixture of the three, because a lot of Randy's district is rural agricultural down there in that Marpaw Springfield area. Tracy's basically city,
Mm-hmm.
City of Walker, and I'm kind of a mixture between the two. So it gives us a good look into what we need to change. I think we're going to change something at the next council meeting, where basically we're giving us a year to change zoning.
Yeah.
So when people come to us and say, well, I already was approved for this, because the way we had the engineering group do it is look at what's in the area and let's keep it that.
Yeah.
If a lot of my district is rural in 1 acre lot living. The difference in the rural and the residential acre lots is rural is you might have a small farm. You know, you might have a couple of farm animals. Where residential doesn't really allow that.
Yeah.
It's residential. So there's some little small things like that you just got to be careful how you zone it. You know, we've had people that's called us, and same thing as I was saying about development. They bought this piece of property 10 years ago, and their intent was to chop it up and put rental properties all on it. Well, I don't have a problem with that if it's in the right area.
Yeah.
You know, but if it's out in a rural area where everybody has 1, 2, 3 acre houses, you know, and you know your houses are, you know, 2 miles apart from each other or half a mile apart from each other, and you want to take this 5 acres and chop it up and put 10 rental properties on it, I kind of have an issue with that. We have areas for that.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to keep it all in the same area. You know, keep residential where residential is. Let the people that want to live out in the country live out in the country. And
That kind of goes with, yeah, like along with the development issues, you know, trying to limit where these massive because I mean a lot of the developments, you know, the big ones get the headlines, you know,
mm-hmm.
Sweetwater, Deer Run, Valere, those get the
Yep,
headlines, but there's a lot of other smaller ones
a
that
lot.
don't really they add up, but they, you know, individually they're not to that scale, and you know, the zoning is just sort of make sure that those that all the developments of all kind go where they're supposed to go.
Correct. And I mean, I have some area, you know, north of Walker. There's a lot of residential. I have a couple of subdivisions up there, Spring Lake subdivision, some property that was already approved for some subdivisions close to it that right now is just a big, huge cow pasture.
Mm-hmm.
So when the engineering group went in and zoned it, they actually zoned it agricultural. And I've had to go back and tell them, no, that's already been approved for residential development. We have to, you know, we can't change it on. Once it's been approved, it's been approved.
Yeah.
You can't go back and change it. And I think they call that spot zoning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't use spot zoning to stop something that's already in the progress.
Well, if you don't mind for a minute, because we're talking about, you know, this year was, like we said, those meetings got long at times, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd like just to give people a little bit more of a peek inside, not to get sympathy or anything, but just to kind of, you know, just relay what y'all deal with. You kind of said during those 2 months, it was those 2 months during when the moratorium on development was in effect, that those might have been the two hardest months you've worked as a councilman.
Yeah.
Kind of because, you know, most of y'all have other jobs as well, so this is on
Right.
top. I mean, yes, you get paid as a councilman, but that's not necessarily the big incentive behind it.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that you used to sit at those meetings yourself, and then when you didn't like what was going on, then you decided to run.
Correct.
So could you talk about just kind of the amount of phone calls y'all get from people, and just the responsibility you feel to, even when you don't want to listen to these people and hear them out? Just kind of
Yeah.
talk about that.
So I mean, one of the things you could probably ask most people in my district that's called me is I tell them straight up when they call me, I'm going to be brutally honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you the facts. And if I can help you, I'll help you. And it does get frustrating when you can't help and you have to tell someone you can't help, and you can tell that they feel like you're lying to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I try to be as honest as I can with it. I try to stick with the facts, follow the rules. And I've just always felt like if I follow the rules, I can't be wrong. If we need to change the rules, we'll change the rules. And that's what we did with this, you know, and that's what led into this development. You know, when I first come in my first term, I walked in screaming zoning, 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 zoning. You know, I used to have a house on Buddy Ellis.
Mm-hmm.
They built that huge woodland crossing in my backyard. I sold, I relocated my family. And when we got relocated, I said, you know, I need to do something. I got to help protect my parish. And I ran for office. And I realized the only thing that could possibly help slow this down was zoning, but the votes were not there.
Mm-hmm.
3 other guys that were willing to go out there and push it with me. and we just couldn't get that fifth vote. No matter how hard we tried, we just couldn't get it. So we waited for this one, and this group, the four of us that wanted us, we represented that Walker, Watson, north of Livingston, kind of the, I guess you'd say, the northwest corner of the parish,
Yeah.
which is where all the development was happening. You know, we were getting bombarded with all these subdivisions, especially the Watson area.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just, and we were like, we need help, and the rest of the parish was like, no, we don't want you to tell us what to do with our property.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want zoning. And unfortunately, it took a development or two happening in them areas for them to actually say, you know what, we probably do need zoning in this parish.
And to be fair, that's one of the appeals of this parish, was that it did not have zoning. That Livingston Parish, for, you know, its history has been more conservative. It doesn't like, you know, government infringement,
Correct.
which is part of the appeal that made it, that led to, you know, people wanting to move out here, led to all these nice shopping centers, led to a great school system because of that. But it's, you know, at a certain point, some things had to give a little bit for the greater good.
Yeah, and I think we're getting there. I really do. I think we're in the right direction, but it's just a start.
Yeah.
We're not even close to being finished. It's just the start. And I think we've gotten a way stronger and faster start than I would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I really expect that by the time the next council takes over, the majority of the kinks will be worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Zoning will be law, and they'll just follow, you know, what it says. You know, now, don't get me wrong, a council can always change the zoning. We just saw that in Denham Springs, where they tried to change the zoning behind the Home Depot.
Yeah.
It failed, but it absolutely can be put up there for a vote. And I mean, if you get 5 votes, you could change, but at least it's some kind of protection.
Yeah.
At least they have to go through, you know, through something to try to get it changed versus just going in there and paying for a permit and build what they want on it.
Yeah. Are there anything, I mean, that in this last year for this council, because this council has, you know, this is the one that's really brought about a lot of, you know, these changes. I mean, especially the last year, but even before the last year, is there any other key things that you know of that y'all are trying to work on, you know, with this last year on the for this current council?
I would really think the majority of our time is going to be spent on zoning,
Mm-hmm.
because we got the rest of the districts that still have to be zoned. We'll be working out kinks with the ones that are already zoned. So I would say that would probably be our major thing, because we'll have it to where, you know, all the way until the end of next year, we can make some changes fairly easy without it having to be the whole vote like you normally would do. So I would say that that's probably our biggest thing. But look, the way this works, as soon as you put one fire out,
who knows?
You turn the corner and there's another one waiting on you. I promise you.
And a perfect segue into this next topic. The other big topic that has taken over the last few months has been CO2 storage.
Yes.
That it seemingly came out of nowhere. I mean, for the first 7 or 8 months this year, it was nothing but development in those council meetings. I mean, that was the majority of what drove the conversations. And then, and I guess it was I can't remember when exactly it was, we start hearing about these CO2 hubs, and then that becomes the conversation driver for the last few months. So, y'all approved a moratorium on Class 6 and Class 5 injection wells. Class 6 wells are the wells that actually pump the CO2 underground. And just to give listeners a quick summary, there are 2 companies that are proposing to store carbon dioxide emissions underground. It is viewed as a way to combat climate change. One is in North Holden, and the other one is underneath Lake Maurepas, which is technically state-owned land. So, so that's kind of the breakdown of it. Both have built or are building their test wells.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe either one would become operational with the actual CO2 emissions before 2024, I think is the earliest.
That's the earliest.
Yeah, I believe
Yes.
that's yes. Uh, so I guess just kind of your thoughts. Like you said, you don't really speak out that much during these meetings. Like
Yeah.
you're never one to really, as chairman, it's kind of you're not your position. But in one meeting, I remember you did.
Yeah.
The term or the phrase I quoted was, "You were tired of being everyone else's dumping grounds."
Exactly. It seems like we're just that easy, and I think a lot of it has to do with zoning. You know, we're an easy dumping ground.
hmm
We already get everybody's garbage at the landfill in Walker. Um, and it just seems like that every time something like this comes up, we're looked at first.
hmm
And we want to change that culture. We don't want to be viewed as that. You know, we're a bedroom community, and your bedroom should be one of the safest places in your home. So we want it to be safe for people to come here and raise their families. Like you mentioned a while ago, our school systems has always been one of the tops. One of the reasons people move out here. You know, they come out here, they get away from the plant environment and the busy cities, and they would just raise their families and let their kids go to school, and they know they're safe here. But when you have something like this comes along, it's like, you know, why are we always first?
hmm
You know, go do it somewhere else and prove the technology to us. Let us see that it is safe. Um, because you can get on the internet and you can find and say whatever you want it to say. If you want it to be bad, you can find bad. If you want it to be good, you can find good. So it's hard to do your own research on the internet because sometimes you don't know what to even trust on that. So what we need you to get out there, show us somewhere where it's worked.
hmm
Let us see some data from that. Um, that would be what I would like to see. Um, I mean, naturally, when you talk to the companies, it's all safe, 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 which you would expect to hear that from them,
Yeah.
that it's safe. Um, and I know that their industry depends on this tremendously, you know, because they have to, you know, reduce their emissions by a certain percentage by 2026. So they're kind of in the hot seat as well, and they're trying to push. And I think we were so focused on our development and the moratorium, and like I said, working harder than we've ever worked, that, you know, we finish it and we sit back in our seats thinking we got breathing room, and all of a sudden we got some constituents sending us emails about O2 injection wells. And we're
Yeah.
like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
You know, and it just it happened that quick on us, and you know, and we're literally talking about it, and I start getting texts and emails from constituents that trucks are lined up on the side of the highway building roads north of Holden.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally was that quick
And
on
that
us.
affects that one. I mean, even though it's not in your district, I mean, it's
It's right
neighboring.
on the
Yeah, yeah,
edge.
yeah,
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 it's
yeah.
right
I
on the
mean, yeah,
edge.
your people probably are affected by that.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, as the crow flies, it's about 3 miles from my
Yeah.
house. So it's right in my front yard. But I don't know it. I don't want it. I really don't want it.
hmm
But it seems like it's happening. It seems like they've already got everything in order, and we're fighting every way we can, but it just doesn't seem like it's working.
And I think one of the things I've heard from a lot, and I've spoken with Representative Sherman Mack. I know we've seen him at a bunch of those meetings, and I know that he said he's kind of working on some possibly trigger legislation for the next
Mhm.
session. You know, that could uh, hopefully help benefit communities where these things go into. And
Mhm.
I know, were y'all talking about some of not trigger legislation necessarily, but just some uh, some way to benefit Livingston Parish, like passing some ordinances? Because that's really been the biggest complaint
Yes.
that people have had is that,
Yes.
Livingston Parish could potentially have all the risk, but doesn't really look like it's getting any of the reward.
So there will be an ordinance written that gives Livingston Parish royalties
Mm-hmm.
off of what's ejected. The biggest thing I think is figuring out how do we get the royalties,
Mm-hmm.
like and what's a good percentage. Um, so I know that they're supposed to do something in the legislation to talk about that as well. The magic number that's been thrown out there is 10%.
Mm-hmm.
But it's 10% of what? Because this is new, so we don't even have anything to say what we might possibly get off of this. That 10% could be $1 million a year. It could be 10 million a year. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't know what that number is other than 10%.
Yeah.
And that doesn't guarantee you the 10%. You take the one in the lake, it's 3 parishes that's dealing with that. It's not just Livingston Parish.
Yeah.
And I've always said with that one, we as Livingston Parish and our council, we stood up and we did a moratorium to try to protect that lake the best we could. But the other 2 parishes didn't. I'm not saying that they were for it,
Mm-hmm.
but we voted a moratorium and we tried something.
Yeah.
We stood up, and at some point we have to sit back as councilmen and say, if they're not going to fight with us, then we got to make sure we get the most we can out of this for our people. Because if it's going to be there and it's happening, we can't be the only ones fighting it.
Have you spoken with anyone from like any of the neighboring parishes? Or?
I've been to a couple of meetings where
Mm-hmm.
some of them have been there, and it's the same thing. I mean, you hear them say they're against it, but they're just not doing anything
Mm-hmm.
like we did. They're not actually putting a moratorium on a Class 5 well. It's just
Yeah.
talk. I
Yeah.
mean, if you don't do something, it's talk. I mean, at least we're making them have to take us to court to say that we don't have the authority to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, then we don't have the authority, but at least we tried.
Yeah. Oh. Well, that will be the thing because you went to the testing demonstration
Yes.
we were at a few weeks ago, and yeah, I mean it was kind of anticlimactic. You didn't really know that it even happened when
Yes.
it happened, but still, I mean that's that lake to a lot of people. I'm not a fisherman. I don't claim to
Yeah.
be, or an outdoorsman at all. But that lake to a lot of people is sacred, and
Yes. I mean,
you
I
know,
grew up out there. I mean,
yeah.
that's where I learned to fish. I mean, that's where we went on the weekends, which most people that lived their whole life in Livingston Parish, that was our playground.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is. And we've gotten some big things that happen in that lake now. One being the Tick Fall 200. And that'll be back this year, and it's been 2-3 years since we had it. So this is going to be a huge year on the lake. And we just want to make sure we keep our lake.
Yeah.
We want to be able to enjoy it. We want to be able to have that place that we can go on the weekends and not have to travel 3-4 hours to get it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people around here like just driving 30 minutes, and go spend the day at the lake and then come back home. Or if we want to stay all weekend, we can. But if something happens at home, we're 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
So you're basically messing with people's playground. That's what you're messing with, and
livelihood for
and
a lot of
some
people.
people's livelihood. We have a lot of fishermen that, for the longest, it wasn't very easy to make a living in Lake Marpaw. And the crabbing industry has gotten phenomenal out there. I mean, when they're running, they're good. The fishing has been great out there. I mean, I was a couple of years ago bragging on how I didn't have to go an hour to catch fish anymore. I could just go right there to Lake Marpaw and fish in the waters around Lake Marpaw. And we have a storm comes through that destroys everything around there, and then next thing you know, they're doing seismic testing, and just everybody's just worried: is this going to impact our lake? You know, how bad? And we just don't feel like we're getting the answers that we want.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would almost think most people would rather hear, well, we're going to disturb the bottom, but it'll settle back down after a year. But we're not even getting that. You know, it's safe. They've done this all the time in the lake. That's our answer. You know, it is hard to say that's not true because, I mean, maybe they have been doing seismic testing all this time and we didn't know. But this has been the first high profile one for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I guess we'll end it maybe on a little bit of a lighter note, because I know that that's you know, a very passionate topic for a lot of people. Is this are these CO2 hubs? And I mean, you know, it's not, like I said, we're in the beginning phases of it now, so it's going to be going on for, you know, some time. But I know at the last meeting, y'all, I believe approved the 2023 budget. And I you know, I guess the one thing I want to talk about is just we go back to traffic, roads, and you know, the last couple of years, y'all been able to, after paying off the bonds from previous administrations, been able to actually have some money to do some road work. I believe, what, 14 million in roads this year, and
13 to 14 million.
And it was the same this past year about. So I mean, so, and you're almost done with paying the jail bond off, and that'll, so I mean, at this time, Livingston Parish seems to be starting to almost be able to have some real money to start addressing a lot of the big needs that people have been talking about.
Correct. And, you know, and the people just voted our roads and bridges tax back in, you know, which that's our DPW funding. So, I mean, all of that's going to be huge for our parish. It's going to be interesting to see that you can pay as you go without having a debt.
Yeah.
I feel like that could possibly open up, free some money up for grants, where before that money was just, I mean, it had to go pay the bonds. I mean, you couldn't, well, we're going to use this money to get this grant. You couldn't do that. We had to pay the bonds. So I can see us possibly turning that money into even more money.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the goal, and get as much as we can out of the people's money. But I definitely, you know, we're building the roads better. They're lasting longer. When they first passed this, they did a bond, and they just went and done this mass work across the parish and just paved as much as they could. And I would venture to say you probably can't find many of them roads that are still in good shape.
No.
You know, because they just weren't, you know, it was, you know, let's hurry up and put some asphalt down on the ground. Where now we're taking the time, we're building them right, we're doing drainage projects, we're changing culverts underneath the roads out, we're, you know, we're really making sure these roads last and hold up.
Yeah. Well, sir, I think that's it for today. Kind of just a year in review on the big issues that came before the Livingston Parish Council. So we appreciate you sitting down with us for a few minutes. Okay. We're about to go into your last meeting. I guess your last meeting as chairman. You have one more.
One more.
One more. Yep. Okay, one more. And well, if you don't mind, just introducing yourself, sir.
All right, Jeff Ard, councilman for District 1 for Livingston Parish and current chairman of Livingston Parish Council.
And this is David Gray, news writer with the Livingston Parish News. Thank you for listening or watching this podcast. This is Sit Down with Mr. Jeff Ard. You can find it on our website, www.livingstonparishnews.com. And remember, we're active daily on our website, and we also have a print edition that comes out every Thursday. So hope everybody has a happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.